Welcome to another instalment of the pharmaphorum podcast. My name is Dominic Tyre and I'm pharmaphorum's creative and editorial director. For episode 26, I spoke with David Solomon, a 30-year life sciences industry veteran who recently took up the position of CEO at Paris-based biopharma company Pharnext. We discussed biotech trends in the era of COVID, including the use of AI and big data in drug development, with a focus on hard-to-treat neurodegenerative diseases. We also looked at Pharnext's progress to date in its mission to develop novel therapeutics for orphan and common neurodegenerative diseases. You can find more details of this episode, including a download link for the podcast and information about other instalments in the series at pharmaphorum.com/podcast. The Pharmaphorum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Stitcher and Podbean, where you can find and subscribe to it by searching for Pharmaphorum. David, welcome to the Pharmaphorum podcast.
Thank you.
If I could ask you to give a quick introduction to yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I'm David Solomon. I'm the new CEO of Pharnext, a Euronext company based in Paris and listed in Paris. And I'm delighted to be here to tell you about Pharnext. I've been a public company CEO for about 15 years. I started my career as a medical academic at Columbia University, was then a venture capitalist, and have been CEO of companies following that. And it's what I love to do most, to add value to really exciting assets and get new medicines to patients and their caregivers.
And we're going to talk a bit more in detail about Pharnext later on in this episode. But could you tell us a little bit about the company? You joined in April, didn't you?
I joined towards the end of April, correct. And I was particularly excited by the idea of leading a platform-to-product play where the platform is using artificial intelligence and big data to discover combinations of medicines that together can address disease and modify disease significantly. Our first medicine that we call PXT3003 derives from that platform and has actually already shown to be a promising therapy for Charcot-Marie-Tooth disorder, which is a disease, a neurologic disease that is a debilitating disease beginning in adolescence that results in many patients ending up in wheelchairs. And we believe that our medicine has effective features to modify disease and help these patients and their families.
We'll certainly come back to talk more about Pharnext later on in this episode. But in terms of your own career, you've got 30-year or so experience across the life sciences industry. I'd be really interested to get your thoughts on what really big biotech trends that you've observed during your career to date.
Well, I think as you see more and more, people trained in biomedical sciences being involved in the business of biotech, you really see excellent science being translated ultimately to products, to medicines. And obviously we've seen a revolution through antibody medicines, new biologics, in terms of innovation, leading the way in developing new medicines that help in scores of diseases and really address a lot of unmet need. And I think in all those companies, those have been investable opportunities by really talented investors who understand how to manage risk. So you've really brought together two universes in the last 20 years, innovation in academic medicine on one hand, and investors that are clever enough to figure out how to manage risk and put money to work on innovation. And that's resulted in just dozens and dozens of new and exciting products and major advances across many diseases.
It certainly seems that, say from my experience reporting on biotech and the pharmaceutical industry, that it's that combination of the business and the science that's perhaps really powering the biotech sector at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the number of terrific companies, now numbering public companies, in Europe, in America, et cetera, in the thousands, means that there are, a huge amount of innovation, many opportunities for good investors, and lots of ability for companies to get the right capital to drive value in their programs. The ultimate beneficiaries are patients and caregivers. So, this revolution started off early with the companies like Amgen, Biogen, Genentech, but, now we have just scores of terrific companies all working in very specified areas. And we see the result being, new and innovative medicines, as I said, including what Pharnext is doing, which is treating rare diseases and that heretofore had no therapy whatsoever. So those diseases now are all addressable, and it's the marriage of great science and great investing acumen in the maturity of biotech now that has really resulted in this revolution.
And another aspect of biotech that I'd like to get your thoughts on are how COVID-19, how the current pandemic is affecting the sector. It really seems like everything on the podcast at the moment is reverting to COVID-19 and how it's affecting things inevitably, given how important and wide-ranging the effects are. But in terms of the biotech sector, how do you see the sector being impacted by the pandemic?
Well, it's focused us all on first what we can do to contribute to public health during this pandemic, and obviously companies that have been or able to, come up with solutions like vaccines. We should all be cheering for those solutions because that'll obviously help in the longer term. In the earlier or mid phases, it's understanding which medicines can modify the viral life cycle. So fortunately, there's been lots of research to date on corona-like viruses and their life cycle, their pathophysiology. And through many good investigations, we now know how medicines as simple as dexamethasone and other more specified antiviral medicines can modify the life cycle of the virus and be effective therapies. Obviously, we're still at our infancy in understanding the disease, and therefore contact tracing and a lot of public health initiatives are still the mainstay of how we prevent the spread of the disease and morbidity and mortality. But obviously, biotech has really stepped up here, and I think people acknowledge that that the heart, the spirit, the passion of biotech is here to contribute. We'll ultimately see how we can come up with better medicines, including vaccines, to treat not only this type of virus, but other similar viruses. I think everyone agrees that, viral pandemics like this are here to stay. They've been with us in the past, from the plague through cholera, through other diseases like SARS, and now COVID-19. And now it's a question of how we can plan well for the future.
Mm-hmm. As a company looking at Pharnext, you're speaking to me, of course, from Paris today. What sort of effects has it had on your company?
Well, we've obviously been much more mindful of how we work, and fortunately, as we're doing this podcast now with terrific technology, we've been able to use different ways of video conferencing that are familiar to all of us to have proper meetings and develop a new culture and a new way of working together, a new way of adding value. And I don't think it's necessarily been bad. I think it's actually focused us on how to use our time and how to use our energy and our passion as biotech innovators, applying this new technology to still advance our products and also raise money. And so it's just a matter of being shapeshifters, of finding new ways to work and new ways to add value and be enthusiasts, all mindful that we have to develop a new culture around all the COVID rules.
From there on to AI and big data in drug development. Drug development seems to be one of the areas at the forefront of how the biotech sector and pharma can use artificial intelligence, and it's clearly something that's foundational to Pharnext. What would you say the combination of AI and big data brings to drug development?
Well, heretofore we always just thought about druggable targets, and so we looked at diseases and we looked at the pathways that we knew as good biologists that are affected in these different diseases, and we would just look at which targets we could identify, which were druggable, and then we'd begin our journey through in silico and then in vitro and then in vivo experiments in animals through the human clinical trial experience. And what AI and big data really allows us to do is start to think about how can we bring new predictive ideas through AI and big data that are unexpected and unanticipated. As we all know, many diseases have elements of what we call polypharmacology. There might be a specific genetic lesion or hit in a disease, but ultimately different pathways or signal transduction pathways are adversely affected. And if we can start to modify those pathways, not with one single medicine, but multiple precision medicines, then we might be able to find new equilibrium and new homeostasis to return to health or cure the disease. And AI can allow us to come up with these predictive combinations, if you will, within polypharmacology. We call it pleiotherapy, where we can use combination of medicines in unexpected and unanticipated ways. And that's exactly what we've done in Charcot-Marie-Tooth. Each of the medicines alone doesn't modify the disease, but in unexpected and unanticipated ways, our triple combination actually provides benefit to patients, as we've earlier demonstrated, and will hopefully demonstrate in ongoing phase 3 pivotal studies. And so that's where AI can really make a difference. It can take our focus away from singular pathways to new and exciting vistas where combinations of medicines can add value that we didn't anticipate before.
And when we say that we're talking about the combination of AI and big data, what big data in particular is used within this to enhance drug development?
Well, we start with GWAS, or genome-wide data, where we can look at associated pathways through genetics that may be perturbed in a disease that has some genetic predisposition, like Charcot-Marie-Tooth. Charcot-Marie-Tooth, as you may know, has in form 1A, Charcot-Marie-Tooth 1A, a duplication of a gene called PMP22, a myelin gene. And by understanding what happens in the myelin pathway, and therefore what happens in electrical propagation of signals from nerve cells to muscle, how this disease progresses. And thereby, by understanding those pathways, we can start to think of what big data can bring to understanding a range of different pathways and a range of different targets, and therefore medicines. And then AI can bring the idea of the unexpected combinations that normally you couldn't predict only with big data alone. So it is very powerful, and it brings new ideas that heretofore weren't obvious, if you will, to biologists studying these diseases earlier.
And in terms of, as you mentioned, Charcot-Marie-Tooth, a rare inherited neurological disorder, of course. And when we look at rare diseases, there's so much unmet need across a massive spectrum of different types of conditions. Would you see this combination of AI and big data being able to have particular applications within the rare disease space?
Well, rare disease is a good place to showcase combinations where there's no available therapy, because you can be sort of a first mover in an important disease where patients and their families suffer terribly, like in Charcot-Marie-Tooth, where patients are diagnosed at age 14 and some by age 30, 40 are in wheelchairs. And if you can modify that disease and that downhill slope, then it's an enormous benefit to society, to patients, and to their caregivers and families. Of course, we believe the approach of AI and big data is applicable to many common diseases as well. We're very interested in diseases like prediabetes even, where we could predict genetically who may be at risk, and therefore not only by good advice by physicians like diet and exercise and other medicines, but we might be able to come up with a range of combination medicines that could retard the onset of diabetes and maintain patients in good health. So it's not only applicable to rare diseases, although that's where we're working, but we hope in the future that our approach of cliotherapy using AI and big data can ultimately benefit diseases that affect millions of patients around the world.
If you were to look to the future, where do you see this combination of AI and big data in drug development going next?
Well, I think it's, in the first instance, it's taking existing medicines that work and work well, but albeit not completely, and adding maybe other medicines to them, for example, that are novel new molecules, as we call them, new chemical entities or NCEs, that might be safe and well tolerated together with existing medicines that could provide perhaps a complete therapy or cure of the disease. And we think that's an exciting place to go, because those combinations might be unexpected and unanticipated, and our work could bring new predictions to what those medicines could be, and then we can conduct those clinical trials rapidly, and bring new ideas. And so we're very focused on that. We're very focused on even some other rare diseases. For example, it could be diseases like myasthenia gravis that affect muscle contraction and fatigue. In a lot of patients, it doesn't affect how long you live, but patients with myasthenia gravis really do suffer terribly every day. And we think that new innovative combinations, including adding to existing medicines, could provide terrific therapeutic optionality to patients and their families.
And so, just rounding out this episode of the pharmaphorum podcast, what do you have next planned at Pharnext? You've been there for nearly 6 months or so. What does the next 6 months, the next year or so, look like for yourselves at Pharnext?
Well, the proof that our AI and big data approach is real will come through the validation of hopefully getting our first medicine, PXT3003, approved in Charcot-Marie-Tooth. So we're right now laser focused on conducting a terrific phase 3 study globally, ultimately filing that for a new drug application with the FDA and with other regulators. And so we just recently hired Dr. Adrian Hepner, who came to us from Eagle Pharmaceuticals in the US and was recently joined just 2 weeks ago, and will lead the effort in the clinic with PXT3003 and the development of also new assets in our pipeline. And so with Adrian joining with a fine management team, we're very focused now on deploying our capital and our human resources to launching this new phase 3 trial in the first quarter of 2021 next year, progressing it rapidly, filing it for a new drug application at FDA. So that's going to be the first focus of our efforts, and we're excited to do that. And we have high hopes that our earlier promising phase 3 data can be translated into a definitive study that results in approval.
Well, it certainly sounds like it's an exciting time for yourself and your company, Pharnext. David, thank you very much for joining me on the pharmaphorum podcast.
Yes, thanks for your time.
And that concludes episode 26 of the pharmaphorum podcast and my discussion with Pharnext's David Solomon about biotech trends in the era of COVID. You can find more details of this episode, including a download link for the podcast and information about other installments in the series at pharmaphorum.com/podcast. The Pharmaphorum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Stitcher and Podbean, where you can find and subscribe to it by searching for Pharmaphorum. And don't forget to visit our website to sign up for daily or weekly email pharmaceutical news and analysis bulletins, and follow us on Twitter, where we are at Pharmaphorum.